Welcome to the Writers League of Texas podcast, conversations and presentations featuring writers and industry professionals talking about the craft and business of writing. More information about this discussion, including details on our panelists and presenters, can be found at writersleague.org. We hope you enjoy the discussion.
Thank you so much, everyone, for being here tonight. So as Becca was explaining, this is our Celebrating Texas Independence panel. That's TS, not CE, if you were confused when you saw how it was spelled on Facebook. And so our panel tonight is made up of some great independents, not just from Austin, but from Dallas as well. So I'll read their bios so you can learn a little more about them, and then we'll get started. So right here we have Colleen Devine Ellis, who has worked in book marketing, publicity, and sales for 18 years. She is currently the senior publicist for the University of Texas Press, where she has been in the marketing department since 2006. She previously worked for Barnes & Noble as a community relations manager. Please welcome Colleen Devine Ellis. Will Evans is president and co-founder of Cinestate, an entertainment studio established in 2016 with the film producer Dallas Sonny. Am I saying that right? Cool. Combining book publishing, film production, and audio experiences. In 2013, Evans founded Deep Vellum Publishing, a nonprofit literary publisher dedicated to translating the world's best novels into English. Evans also co-founded Deep Vellum Books in early 2016, a brick-and-mortar bookstore and cultural community center in Dallas's historic Deep Ellum neighborhood. His translation of Oleg Kashin's political satire novel, Far Dwar Russia, I'm hoping I'm saying that well. That's right, okay. A Fantastical Tale of Life Under Putin was published by Restless Books in 2016. Please give a round of applause to Will Evans. Abby Fennewald is the Director of Marketing and Publicity at BookPeople, where we are tonight, the largest independent bookstore in Texas. She previously managed events at Politics and Prose in Washington, D.C. Please welcome Abby Fennewald. And last but not least, we have Sunny Leal. She's an associate editor for Fields magazine and a reader for Feminine Inquiry here in Austin. Having completed her studies in English and rhetoric at the University of Texas, she currently resides in Austin as well, where she works as a proofreader. Growing up in a traveling military family, fiction was her constant companion. Now poetry holds a special place in her heart as a means to better understand the self and those around her. Along with her literary endeavors, she enjoys time with her cats and best friend, watching TV dramas, and shouting her innermost thoughts into the void that is the World Wide Web. Please welcome Sunny Leal. So on our blog, as you guys know, we interviewed each of you in advance of this panel. So I kind of want to talk about things that each of you said and then ask you to elaborate. If you haven't read their wonderful interviews, you should go to writersleagueoftexas.wordpress.com if you want to read the full interviews. So we'll actually start with you, Sunny. So we asked the question, what do you define the Texas literary landscape as? What's unique or special about it? And something that you said, not only does Texas host an array of different racial and ethnic backgrounds, especially being so close to the border, but the state is home to so many different types of landscapes, climates, histories, and lifestyles that if you want to write about a certain subject, there's an audience for it here. So I wanted you to kind of elaborate on that and your experience as an editor and as a reader.
I started off as a reader, and I've just recently been moved to an associate editor, but I would receive like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of poems. I think it's kind of like in the landscape poems that you see a lot of the different things that we have to offer, because people always think that there's poems about love and there's poems about feeling, and just to kind of see people discuss things outside of that realm, just like so overcome with like how beautiful a space is. And I've recently interviewed a poet here in Austin named Irene Lara Silva, and her most latest poetry book, it's called Blood Sugar Canto, and it's gorgeous. It's completely about her experience and her historical experience with diabetes, and that kind of comes with her heavy, Latin heritage, which is very dominant here. So not only do you get like the Latin heritage of Texas, but you get what comes with that. You get like the just history that comes with that, the sickness that comes with that. And you just kind of get to explore a lot of different elements as opposed to just very like basic core genre types. So that's kind of more like what I've been seeing and what I meant kind of meant through that.
Yes. Kind of similarly, Will, you said, because of the sheer size of the state, we can lose sight of the fact that Texas has one of the strongest literary communities in the country. We have much to celebrate. Could you kind of elaborate on how the size of Texas affects the literary community here?
Yeah,
it's a big question.
Where to begin? I think it has a lot to do with the landscapes and the diversity of people. Just the diversity of Texas blows my mind, not being from here. So I kind of love living here. It reminds me of being in a foreign country, and I mean that in the most positive way. In that Texas is like a melting pot of people, always has been. It's a crossroads, and it's really become a melting pot because not only do we have the strong heritage that comes from being a border state, but also from the port of Galveston being the second biggest immigration center outside of Ellis Island, and all the history that comes from being a Confederate state and all the baggage that comes with that. And I mean, we have this friction that comes from people getting together, and the stories that come from this friction and the way that we try and deal with it and move forward. And I'm not going to trash talk Austin, but when I lived in Austin, everyone here, especially music, it was like, man, Austin was so cool 30 years ago, or 10 years ago, or yesterday, or whatever. It was always like someday that was in the past. And something I truly cherish about Dallas, and I found in it's a Texas thing. It's not just Austin. Those are music guys, but Texas's best days are always ahead of us, right? And like that's something I really value about the state is that the way that we look at history as a continuing process, and that we're always getting better. We're going to make our cities better. We're kind of like the state of the future in this way, and we have so many people and coming together and building. In Dallas, there's a lot of business stuff, but we also have amazing arts that come around that too. And talking about the way that Dallas changes so fast. Dallas's best days are always tomorrow. It's never been yesterday. Dallas will tear down something built yesterday just to rebuild it again tomorrow. It's like the way the city goes. And so you lose a lot of the history and the heritage that way, but there's now a strong art community talking about that. And so the way that this friction works and the vast diversity of people and landscapes, I'm obsessed with that because I think that's where the best stories come from, is like figuring out how we, can tell these stories and all the diversity of stories that entails. That's what drives me constantly.
So kind of continuing on with that idea of community, Abby, you said as a bookseller, it's always special to promote local writers and presses. We like to think there's a certain synergy in all of our goals, as we want to keep the literary landscape vibrant, and having a bookstore as a community space that works with local writers to sell their work is an important part of that. Could you kind of elaborate on that idea?
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that is having groups like the Writers League here every month. We want to be a part of the community, and if we're not doing that, we're not doing our jobs right as independent booksellers. There's a lot of talk sort of in the bookselling world of thinking of a bookstore as sort of a third space. You have your home, you have work, and then you have a bookstore that you go to, that you have a community. And so I think, in terms of author events, the most fun events that we have in the store are with local authors. It's them, their friends, their family. It's a celebration of their book. They have worked on a book usually for years and years. It's finally in print, and they're seeing it on the shelf in a physical bookstore where their friends can go and buy their book and take it home with them. And so that just feels like the absolute most important work we can do. These guys were excited about finding signed George Saunders books, which is wonderful, but I really think, last summer we had a great event for the local press Small Object. It was amazing. They're doing really wonderful, exciting work, and to have them with their writers who are local to Austin in our local Austin Independent Bookstore was just sort of the perfect moment of bookselling. So yeah.
Continuing on with that, Colleen, you talked about kind of what you've seen as the really supportive aspects, particularly in Austin. You said one of the unique aspects of the Texas literary landscape is the overwhelming support that writers and others in the book community here provide to one another. Can you kind of talk about your experience with that?
Yeah, I would love to talk about that actually, because it's one of the things that I feel in my heart about working in publishing here. And all of the things that you all have said also kind of build to that point. It's very interesting to hear perspectives from different parts of the literary community that I don't get to see in my own work. So when I started as a bookseller and doing events, I was really surprised when I would see, and this is with especially sort of Austin or Texas-centric writers, whether they were from here and came back for an event, or they live here and continue to live here. I was always surprised to see in the audience someone at someone's event would be all these other writers coming out, and then they would actually buy the book. And I still see that. Just recently, for instance, Amanda Air Ward had an event here, and there were a ton of local writers here who also bought her book. Same with Sarah Bird and some other people that I know but don't publish with the press that I work for. And so I just love that they're there for each other. I see them on social media building each other up, and it's not about how successful you are. It's that once some of these people who've worked really hard to have some sort of success as published authors, they really want to help other people rise along with them. And I really am touched by that culture here. And there are a lot of people doing it in a lot of different places too. The Writers League is a great example of that, where you can come and you can learn about the business. It's not just the writing, but it's also this other really important stuff. But the Society for Book Writers and Illustrators, I used to do a lot of events with them, and they're great at that. The romance writers, very strong groups in Texas. They had their annual conference in San Antonio a few years ago, and I went. Actually, I was freelance writing for a publication, and I covered it for them, and I was just blown away. I was not a romance reader. I kind of am now, because I just the community of it, and all these people who really had great advice and concrete ways to guide people in the business of writing, were doing that just because they wanted to help other people. And so I see that, personally, as a reader and someone who goes to a lot of book events because I enjoy them, but also as part of a publishing community. People know how hard it is, and I always say the best writers, and a lot of the most successful ones, they are generous with their time and their attention to people who may need it.
I love how much we've been talking about community and how that's such a huge, important part of the culture of Texas, as well as specifically independence. And so I want to hone in a little bit more on what you all feel are the roles and responsibilities of being an independent, and kind of moving along with this idea of going to events and actually kind of buying books and showing your support in that way. Abby, you mentioned that as a bookseller, you all have a lot of control about what you talk about in the store. You mentioned the idea of hand selling. So I wanted you to kind of elaborate a little more on what that is for people who might not know, and if you want to talk about Exit West as well.
Yeah, sure. So when you're browsing in the bookstore downstairs and someone comes up to you and says, "Oh, are you finding everything okay?" And you say, "Yes," or you say, "No, I'm looking for a suggestion," and then they show you what they're reading. So that's what hand selling is when they're telling you what they think that you should be reading. And some of our absolute best booksellers will come up to you and say, "Oh, I see you're carrying around, this book, and I read it. Here's what I thought. I think if you like that, you'll also like this other book," and bring you over and show you another book. So it's kind of amazing. We have one guy who is one of the inventory managers for our first floor, and he reads everything. And so we always know when Raul has been hand selling a book, because we see the sales go way up. Because if he's been reading a book and then it's on the shelf and he's here for his Saturday shift, so he has probably 7 hours on the book floor on a Saturday. If he's selling that book to at least one person every hour, which he can do on his best Saturdays, then that's automatically probably 5 more copies than we normally sell on that day. So there's a great power in being an independent bookseller in that you can choose every single time you talk to a customer what you're going to recommend. So whether it's your favorite local author, your favorite sort of perennial author whose new book is just out, something like Savage Detectives that maybe someone has never heard of and would never think about reading, but you love it and you know that everyone needs to be reading it. So right now in the store, we have sort of gone a step further and basically chosen sort of an all-staff pick. So there's this book out now called Exit West, and it just came out last week, and probably half of the booksellers in the store have read it. So I guarantee you, if you went downstairs right now and you asked one of the booksellers what you should be reading, most of them would say, oh, there's this new book called Exit West. It's this really beautiful love story, but it's also talking about the refugee and immigrant experience. You just have to read it. Also, we're donating part of the proceeds to Caritas of Austin. So, you're going to buy this great book and then have it go to a good cause. And so, already in the first week, we've sold almost 50 copies of that book. So you can just really change what's happening in the life cycle of one specific title when you're an independent bookseller. We don't have some overlords telling us what exactly we're supposed to be promoting or having out on display or what our staff cards should say. So you'll see all the staff selections downstairs, and some of them are beautifully illustrated, so you'll want to look at them, and some of them just have bullet points about why someone liked that book. And so there are all kinds of ways like that where, because no one is controlling what we are trying to sell you, it makes it feel like a much more genuine experience. Like you're really getting something that someone wants you to have in your hand.
Thank you. I think it's important, too, to remember that as readers and as people who buy books, we're part of that power. So if you are seeking out these independent books yourself, that's all the better. Kind of continuing on with that idea, Sunny, you mentioned there's so much room in our literary landscape, and with so much space, a lot of the lesser-known voices can get lost. And I wanted you to kind of elaborate on that, specifically with shorter works of fiction and poetry. I feel like a lot of people aren't always seeking out their local literary journals and things like that. So if you could speak to that a little bit. If you want to give an example maybe of a lesser-known voice that you feel like Fields has helped to lift up or something like that, that could be a starting point as well.
Okay, definitely. Well, there's always going to be the bigger names in literature that people are going to go to, that this release comes out, this New York Times bestseller comes out, and you want to read that. So that's where your money is going. And you don't really think, hey, I'm going to buy this, but then I'm also going to go look for some like independent poetry chapbook or somebody's first work of fiction. And so I feel like we've seen a lot of people just have the opportunity. With Fields, we publish our own journal, and it features a bunch of great poets, writers, bands, photographers, artists, so many different creatives. We also host events just to kind of give these artists also a avenue to kind of get that work out there and get that work heard immediately. So we'll host like poetry readings from time to time in conjunction with like other journals, other small presses. Those small presses then have the opportunity to kind of get their own works out there on the table, seen, touched, opened, read by people. I remember in the past November, we did a poetry reading in conjunction with, I think, Tabloid at ATM Gallery, and Dalton Day read, and another poet named Julie read, and they both had amazing readings, just really captured the audience's attention, just really got you to feel exactly like what was written, which I think is so much easier to get when you can hear the poet read it themselves. And when you can hear that and when you can see the person feeling that, it makes you more apt to kind of walk up to that person and say, hey, how can I buy your book? Can I buy your book right now? If you don't have it right now, where can I get it? And I know so many of us have like completely fell in love with Dalton Day and his work based off of like that one time we had a reading with him alone. Now he's going to be in our upcoming issue, and I've just kind of seen like so much excitement around him and so much excitement around the other poets that we've kind of had the opportunity to hear, give them a place to read at, and giving them the opportunity to read is what's important to getting them more acknowledged in a very, very wide space of literature.
Colleen, you also mentioned this idea of promoting authors who perhaps traditional publishers might not necessarily take a chance on. If you could speak a little bit more to that. You mentioned this really interesting book called The Jemima Code in your interview.
Sure, and I grabbed, they had a copy downstairs, so I grabbed it, and it's over there. But just as the press that I work for, the University of Texas Press, we're an academic publisher, but what that means in this day and age is that we really are an independent press. We have to support ourselves. We have an annual budget, and we have to pay for everything and sell what we say we're going to sell, or else there is trouble. And so when we do things like we sign a book and we come up with a pub plan, the number of books that we're going to be publishing of a specific title, we're like micro-focused on how many of these books we think we can sell, because for a larger publisher, they may say they're going to print 10,000 copies of a book, thinking 3,000 of these we are going to pulp. Like, that's an acceptable margin of error for them. For us, an acceptable margin of error might be 50 copies. We don't normally do 10,000 print runs, but so we're used to publishing books that, for us to define the success of a book, is not necessarily that it has to be some kind of bestseller in someone's opinion. It needs to be a book that we're proud of. There are certain procedures that you have to go through with an academic press. It's called peer review, where once we get a manuscript in, we actually have to send it out to at least 2 people who are experts in the subject matter and get their take on it. And if either one or both of them has problems with it, we may have to send it out to someone else after revision. So it's there's a lot to publishing with an academic press that you don't necessarily get with a more trade publisher. But we do publish trade books as well. So the Jemima Code is an example of that, and it's standing up over there. The author, Toni Tipton Martin, is a journalist, a food journalist, and she's also a historian of African American cookbooks and a collector. And over about 30 years of collecting these books, just finding them and searching them out, she's established the largest privately owned collection of African American cookbooks, and they start before the Revolutionary War. The first book that she has is from a house servant who wrote a book about he was sort of like the manager of a big house, and he wrote a book on how to manage a house. And it's remarkable to see this book. So she wrote a book on these books, and so that, believe it or not, that is not something that people do, that they, much less on this topic, where she's really the only person outside of a few select museums that even has this source material. So we knew it was going to be this big, colorful, expensive book to produce. There weren't a lot of comp books, which is, you guys can, testify to.
Can you explain what comp books are, just for people who might not know?
When you're publishing a book, people want to know what's a comparable title, so that I know what to expect with your book, because somebody else has already done it or done something similar. And it's sometimes it's a great thing to not have any comparable titles, because it's very exciting. You say, we're doing this with this author who has this great book. We're going to put this out in the world, and we're going to find the right people who are interested in it in the media, who are going to talk about it, and the right booksellers who are going to be interested in it. And we're going to make something happen here. And this book is worth it because it's special. So we have to invest a lot of money in it, and we have to know that up front, like this, we have to print a lot more of this because we have to sell it in order to pay for it. And but as a team, we make these decisions as a team at UT Press, and we have to, even if you can't control the sales at the end of it, and that's where things don't 100% work out, you still have to feel good about the book. You still have to say, well, I wouldn't have changed doing this book. So that's an example of one that we really love. It won a James Beard Award last year. We've had to reprint it twice, and it's like $45. I mean, come on, who's buying $45 books? But a lot of people did, and so we're going to do another book with this author eventually. But
wonderful. So with that idea of finding the right reader for the book, Will, one of the things you talked about in answer to this question about the role of being an independent is that you have a lot more weight given to the fact that you need to be building relationships with readers, but also with writers as well. Could you speak to that idea of how being an independent allows you to build those relationships a little differently?
One thing that was really important to me when I founded Deep Vellum Publishing, which was the translation publishing house I founded when I moved to Dallas, was even though I had never worked in publishing before, I knew that I was my own target reader, and so I wanted to reach out and try to market the books in a way that I felt as a reader I had never been marketed to. And so I'm sitting next to an expert in the field, so I kind of wish I could just take notes of what she's saying. But the most important thing for me from day one was to develop close relationships with the independent booksellers in this country. We have a wonderful network. There's like, let's say 50 to 100 bookstores across the country that sell literary titles of works in translation, right? That like push it hard, that have a bookseller on the floor who like reads the next Bolaño, right? If no one here's read Bolaño, he was kind of a big deal 10 years ago, and he spawned another wave of Latin American authors getting published in a big way. And so the comp title for every single Latin American author is Bolaño. And you're going back because 10 years ago he was selling a crap load of titles and everyone was staff picking it at BookPeople and all the great bookstores. But you need to find that bookseller, whether they're in Austin or New York or Topeka or Olympia or Oxford, Mississippi, these bookstores that carry a lot of weight in their community and carry a lot of weight nationwide. The goal is to get the book into the hands of as many readers as possible who will love that book. And so you can't do that alone in New York or Dallas when everybody lives everywhere. So you got to work with the independent booksellers who know what they're doing, with the reviewers, with the bloggers, with like the influential reader. Because the crazy thing about this whole industry is that like 75% of book sales are driven by word of mouth, right? No matter how much marketing you put into your subway ads and your billboards and stuff, all you're trying to do is influence the person who will then tell their friends to go read that book. So what it really boils down to is making sure that we can work within that independent literary community. Like how otherwise can we make Texas feel like a literary community? It's thanks to organizations like the Writers League that you guys know that we have any literary community in Dallas. You know what I mean? And it's kind of like, how do we connect all the dots? Because we have amazing publishers in Nacogdoches and Lubbock and Dallas and El Paso, but we need like to be able to connect the dots. And because we're a state as big as a country with as many people as any Western European nation, we really need to strive to like always work together to like lift each other up and to get the writers into the hands of the readers who are going to love them.
Can I just add something though? I think an underlying message too to what Will was just saying is when we're as independent publishers, we also have to be very authentic with our outreach. It's not a press release that goes out to a list of 2,000 people, because you have these books that have a very specific audience, like you're talking about. You're trying to find the readers, and when you find them, especially booksellers, you don't want them to think this person is just trying to pass off everything they publish on me. It takes a lot of time, but you have to respect that person and let them know, whether it's a reviewer, a bookseller, someone else, I think I know what you like, and I think this is one of those things. And it's not just a blanket. People ask me all the time. I don't do press releases. People ask me that. Authors ask me that frequently, and I say, I don't know what you think that's going to do for you, because what I'm trying to spend my time doing is finding actual people who know about your book now, rather than an email that's just going to go in their trash. So.
And to follow up on that just real quick, because I could talk about this all day. This is so fascinating. This is the core of what we do is marketing. We are publishing these books, but publishing as a thing involves marketing, because that's what a publisher does for you. Is one of the things that they do. And the idea of authenticity in independent publishing is so important. We wrote it into our what do you call it?
Missions.
Exactly. Cinestate's mission statement includes the word authentic, because it's extremely important to remain authentic to yourself and authentic to your audience, and never speak down to a reader or to a moviegoer or anybody, and always lift everyone up and to include as many people as possible. That is so important to everything that we do. And it's just crazy because something that independent publishing doesn't have yet is the idea of independent attached to publishing the way it is to film, the way it is to business, being in this store that basically created the independent business movement in this city, which has made it so special. And also the idea of independent film, right? Everybody loves indie films. Everybody loves indie music. We're in the capital of these things in Texas, and yet no one goes and buys or goes out there and seeks indie publishers the same way. Not enough readers do, I should say. And so, how can we get people to think like, oh my God, maybe New York Times bestsellers don't speak to me. Maybe I should go seek out A Strange Object, a great indie publisher in Austin, Cinestate, UT Press. Because when you are buying those books, you are having a direct conversation with an editor. It's not like at the big houses where there's so many voices in between you and that author. It is usually a much closer connection. And independent publishers, there is the author, there is us, and we are getting it to you. And we want you to be a part of this conversation. And it is a much more direct conversation.
Can I add one more thing
Please
about that?
do.
As a person who's on the receiving end of a lot of emails and advanced copies of books from publishers asking for me or one of our booksellers to read them, it is incredibly more meaningful for it to be from someone who we know with a note that says, I think that X bookseller is really going to like this book, because it means that they know that bookseller. They have seen what other sorts of things they've been reading. They know that they think this is actually targeted toward them. And it's not just something they threw in the mail to 100 different people across the country. So, I think a lot differently about something if it's Colleen emailing me and saying, here we have this local author coming from UT Press. Here's what I think we should do.
I just did that to her tonight.
Yeah. And I immediately said, yeah, sure, let's do it. Rather than, someone who I don't know and it's not a personal connection in any sort of way.
So as far as for those people who you don't know, and we'll kind of open this question up to all of you in your different iterations of independence, what as a bookseller catches your eye when you're getting more of like a cold email from someone?
I mean, I think at this point, even from sort of the larger publishers who don't know, like me personally or our booksellers personally, for the large part, the pitches that stand out are, I'm talking about for events here, are ones where they have a specific reason or connection to think that their book is the right fit, either for BookPeople specifically or for the Austin community, or they have a really creative out-of-the-box idea for what the actual event will be. So, if they're saying, we've done a lot of research about where we think this author's readers are, and we think a lot of them are in Austin, and here's why, here's our sort of reasoning behind that, I'm a lot more likely to say yes than if they're just saying, here's this book we're publishing, and we are pushing it really hard everywhere. I'm like, okay, well, that's fine, but you're probably pushing it really hard in New York, and I don't know that people in Austin are going to care about that, so why do you think? And so, at this point, I sort of get to go back to them and say, okay, but why? And is there someone in Austin who they know? Is there a group in Austin who they've worked with before? Do they have a friend here who, has a huge network in town? Or tell me more, rather than getting that sort of personal attention.
Gotcha. Sunny, as an editor, what kind of catches your eye when you're reading somebody who you haven't heard of before or brand new?
Kind of more so what I do is like individual submission where all of them are considered for the journal. It's not like a review or an advanced reader copy. But what kind of catches my eye is just a voice that is not only different, but kind of just feels like the word's been thrown around, authentic, genuine. A lot of people tend to write things that they think or submit things that, they kind of feel that they think fields would be interested based on what they've read from us before, or I thought my stuff would be a good fit for you, and it's very obvious that they kind of thought it'd be a good fit too, and you can kind of read that off of it. Not to say that it's not appreciated by somebody and it's not a good poem or it's not a good story or whatever, but you want to feel that you're getting something authentic and you're getting that person. You're not getting a version of that person that they're trying to tailor themselves for you to like. So for me, the things that stand out is just something that kind of hits you and stays with you long after, because I never make a final decision on a poem until I'm talking it over with like my co-editors and the readers. And it's kind of in that conversation, it's like, okay, well, out of the hundreds that I've read, what is still on my mind right now? And the ones that are on my mind are the voices that are just completely unique.
Well, can you speak to that as well?
To build off of what both have said so far, number one, do your homework. knowing who you're submitting, querying, anything, talking about an event. Know your goal. Have a goal in mind. Connecting your work and your project to the mission and the orientation of the organization you're reaching out to. At Cinestate, my partner made a movie called Bone Tomahawk. Has anyone here seen the movie Bone Tomahawk? No one?
Oh, he is. He's
Okay,
named-
great. My man. Thanks all y'all who have seen it. We have it all over our website. We have what we call the Bone Tomahawk principle. It drives everything we do at Cinestate. It involves the way that we have a relationship with the creator. He had a story that no one else would do, and so my partner put his ass on the line to get that movie made. And it's a really amazing story, and it was done really well, and it connected with audiences, and it's become a big success. That is the principle of everything that we do. And we get a lot of, what's the word, cozy mystery submissions? That's a subgenre, right? That's a
Definitely
subgenre.
is,
Cozy
yes.
mystery. We are not going to publish a cozy mystery. If you've seen Bone Tomahawk, if you've seen Bone Tomahawk, you know what we're about. We don't need horrific violence in every movie we do, but we need something. And we need to know, you know what I mean? You need to have something. That authenticity can come in any number of forms. It's what makes you unique and what makes you fit with someone. And so for us, we're looking for the something that is too blank for someone else, right? Too awesome, too violent, too whatever. And when you're trying to pitch that, it's kind of difficult because you need to think about yourself as if you're marketing yourself. And I know everyone hates marketing themselves, especially if you're a writer, because you are an artist. But when you make that first connection with someone who can take your art and then market it for you, it is very important to talk about yourself in a way that is easy to understand. I signed a book that was pitched to me by an author who had never published a word anywhere in his life. And the pitch said, I think you may be into this. It's Blade Runner meets Westworld. My God. It was like the man reached into my brain and envisioned a dream project. Okay, I'll read your book, person. And I read it, and I signed it the next day. So anything can happen. If you pitch it right to the right person, anything can happen. And so you just gotta know your audience and be true to yourself. Don't try and sell yourself to someone who isn't gonna fall in love with you and see you through and back you 150% for the rest of your life.
Yeah. And to extend that idea, something that I talk, when I get, I'll call them anxious, an author who's really anxious and they have 50 different things that they want to do. And one thing about UT Press is our trade books are in a variety of subjects. So we almost never do fiction. The only fiction we do actually is a few literature and translations every year. Oh, you know Inez? He knows our acquiring editor for those. So with the nonfiction subjects, you know, we have fine art, photography, and then we have history, we have architecture, we have, you know, Texas, our Texana books. So they're in different audiences. They're going to different reviewers and things like that. So when I have someone who's very scattered about what they want, I ask them a few questions about defining success. And people, their knee-jerk reaction usually involves sales, and for us, that isn't really defining success. I mean, we want to sell the books that we print, but we're not necessarily printing thousands and thousands of copies. We do want to sell those, but we want the author to also think about if you do want to sell 50,000 copies of a book, you should look at books that sell that much and what they have to do to reach that. You know. If you want a book that reviewers read and write great things about, well, then that's something, you know, there's a certain way to try and accomplish that. You can't guarantee it, but if the book is good enough to do that, then we're going to work on doing that. But it's so that you don't feel disappointed because you never defined what would make you feel happy. You know, you think, I didn't sell as many books as so-and-so. I didn't get reviewed here. You know, I didn't get reviewed in the New York Times, which people still ask all the time. People still ask me about Oprah. I'm like, it's been a long time since Oprah's done anything with books, really. So I think it's just so you can say to yourself, and if you do want to, that is your goal, is like, this is something I want to make money at, and we didn't even touch on that idea, but then you need to talk about that before you sign a contract, because a publisher, especially an independent publisher, is signing a book that they believe in, and they believe success is defined in a certain way, and that you may not find that out until the book is being published, and you say, well, I swear I had someone who we had a print run of 2,000, good book, really good book. And she said, what's our plan for the New York Times bestseller list? And I said, well, we should have printed another 60,000 copies just to ship them out. But, that's when she asked the question. And so then she was disappointed, which I thought this was a wonderful book, got great reviews. We actually ended up reprinting it, but so I felt bad that she didn't feel good, because I thought she should.
So each of you has kind of touched on this a little bit, but in that submission process or process of pitching an event, what are common missteps that you see that you would advise people to avoid? Everybody's going to make mistakes, but just so we can kind of prevent some of them.
Sending me a link to their book on Amazon. Sending me a link to their book on Amazon, like at least once a week. At least.
Other missteps that you all have seen. Anybody feel free to jump in.
I would say one of the biggest missteps I've seen is like sending an intro email along with the submission that lists each and every single place that they've been published before. Like long lists of every microjournal that they've been in. Not to say that that isn't an accomplishment, but then when you finally open it, you're kind of like hyped up, like this is gonna be great, this is gonna be awesome, they've been everywhere. And then you kind of read through it, and it's not bad, but it's not wow either. And instead of thinking like that was really great accreditation for them, it's kind of like, why? So I just feel more so like it's great to feature where you've been published, but look inside yourself and see what made you proud. So that way when we look at it, we can look at like maybe 5 journals and be like, oh, well, this is cool, instead of just being kind of overwhelmed.
To piggyback off of what I said earlier about tailoring your letters and your queries to each person and organization that you are submitting to, something very important to remember about this business is that there are somewhere between 300,000 and 400,000 books published every year. And so what makes you special is very important, because you are very special. But you're going to be joining the flood, and we need your help in figuring out how to identify what makes you special, and so that we can get it out there and prove how special you are. And so something really important about that is in your query letter, don't just say, oh, cool, you made Bone Tomahawk, I liked it, and then move on and then give me a pitch. That's kind of boring. Boring happens to too many query letters. Be very evocative in your description of your work. Give me some hooks. Give me something. And this is something that is a big overarching goal of what we're doing at Cinestate, but bringing the idea of cinematic writing to literature. I don't mean like just trying to write a big epic that's 1,000 pages long. I mean the idea that things have to move along. Things must be driven along, and there must be something that is a hook in everything to make it special. And sometimes it can be a plot twist, and sometimes it can be your style, sometimes it could be your bio. These things all make you and your story special, and so whatever it is, make it stand out and make it leap to the top of my attention when I'm reading that.
Well, I don't do acquisitions. Sometimes I see them, but I'm not usually part of that first submission, so I'm not the person saying yes or no, we're going to look at this. But to go back to the marketing thing, for me, doing a panel like this or something where I actually have to market myself to give you a bio and a picture and all of that stuff, and it does remind me of how awkward that can feel when you have to promote yourself and you're the author and you're like, not only are you promoting yourself, but it's this book that's very special to you. And so it is important to I think Will touched on this too, but to feel confident that yeah, you should do that. That's good. You people want to hear your voice. And even though you were kind of joking about the cozy mysteries, I do read those as like my escape thing. I have certain authors who write cozies, which is like my fun place. And if that's what you're writing, there's some great publishers who do those, and they churn out 1,000 of them a month. But I would love to hear about your cozy mystery. If you had one, I couldn't publish it for you, but I might read it. And so just knowing that you've gone this far, you're writing, just go for it. And people who are reading, I mean, we do want to, we want to read good books. So, people are always looking.
And something very important to remember is don't give up. There is a publisher or someone out there who really believes in you and can help you along and get it out there. My favorite anecdote is Marlon James, who wrote the amazing Brief History of 7 Killings that came out last year, the Jamaican American writer, who published this novel, won the Man Booker, the biggest novel prize in the world. And that his first novel was rejected 99 times, right? 99 times. Could you imagine being told no 99 times? For some of us, it's happened. And then on the 100th one, he got a deal with an indie publisher based in Brooklyn called Akashic. And through that, he was able to get a faculty teaching position in the U.S. at a university. And with that position, he was able to sit down and write a gigantic, epic novel, Brief History of 7 Killings, and then you've become one of the biggest authors in the world. So find that person who can help get you to the next level. They're out there. We're out there.
In the vein of finding that person, I want to talk just generally about the submission process for each of you, and then with Abby, we can talk about how someone, if they want to do an event here, would do that. We can start with you, Sunny. You mentioned something about short story and poetry submissions that not everyone may be aware of, that there's a cover letter that goes with that submission typically, and that it's not quite the same as a query letter that you would send to a traditional publisher. If you could just kind of explain what that process is, how someone could submit to Fields or Feminine Inquiry.
So Feminine Inquiry and Fields can both be submitted to via our websites, and then we receive them through both now submittable. So it's a lot easier for us to see it. I feel like both of them have been linked at several places, like on the blog, where we have the interviews with all of us. So both of those websites are linked there.
Yes.
I'm more than happy to talk with any of y'all about possibly submitting. We take works of fiction, we take short stories, we take parts of larger works of fiction, poetry, and I think I've already said nonfiction, but that's also there. We also take nonfiction at both Feminine Inquiry and Fields. There is a cover letter that you can attach to both journals' submissions processes, just kind of telling us about you, where your work has been featured, and how you found us and everything. And it's always nice to know how you found us as well. So all of our stuff is through online, where you can find us, and we can help you figure that out afterwards as well.
Thank you. Abby, for somebody who's a local author who wants to do an event, what process would they go through?
You just send me an email. This is the part where I'll give you my email address if anyone wants it.
Get your pencils ready.
It is just Abby, ABBY, at bookpeople.com. So you can also guess it really easily. But you send me an email. You try to send me your email at least a couple of months before your book comes out. We try to tie our events reasonably closely to the book's release. Your book launch is when you might be getting a review in the New York Times or elsewhere. You might be, out and about promoting the book yourself, so that you might be able to tell people that you're having an event at Book People. So we have any of that release buzz right around your book's release. So you send me your email, you say, hey, my book's coming out in a couple of months. Here's the title, here's who's publishing it. Here's a link so you can look at some of the content on the publisher's website.
Amazon.
Not to Amazon. Just send me your publisher's website. You can say, this is sort of the date range I was thinking of. What do you have available? If you feel like it and you want to send me a summary, you can. If you feel like it and you want to send me your bio, you can. But hopefully you're going to just email me a link, and that'll take me to whatever I need to know about you. And then I'll email you back. And I try very hard to respond to every single event pitch that we get at Book People. There are a lot of them, so sometimes it takes a while. But yeah, and then we have a conversation. So if you're a local author, I'll probably say, okay, great. Well, it's so exciting that your book is coming out. About how many people do you think that you personally are going to bring to an event? Not talking about the marketing you're going to do. I'm not talking about the press you think the book is going to get. I'm talking about You, your friends, your family, who's coming to this event, who's buying a book. Or do you have a personal website? Are you going to have BookPeople as a buy link on your website? What are your sort of plans around this book? And then we just have a conversation about what will work and what makes sense.
Well, for you, if somebody wants to pitch to Cinestate, do they need an agent is one question that I'm sure people are asking, and what's your process as well?
You do not need an agent to submit to Cinestate. Agents are good sometimes. And we want the stories. That's what's most important to us. We want the authors. And so if we have to go through an agent to talk to you, that's fine. So we have a submissions@cinestate.com email that's open constantly. But because you all are very special and I want to open the floodgates to you, will@cinestate.com. Say hi. Even if you don't have something right now, but you like what we're doing, just say hi. Just want to make friends. Come up to Dallas, visit us. We're going to be doing a lot of events around our books and our movies all throughout the state. Constantly, so check out cinestate.com, sign up for our mailing list. We're going to be shooting a lot of movies in Texas, and so every book that we sign, I should say, it's our business model. Every book we publish, we will adapt into a film or TV series. That is our business model. So we will not sign that. We won't sign that many books, but the ones that we do are get very special attention. And so that goes without saying. We want to make as many Texas movies as we can because we're based here. And we're not exclusively Texas. We're shooting a movie in Dallas this month, which is going to be a lot of fun. But then the next movie we shoot is in Vancouver, British Columbia, and then after that it's in upstate New York. We shot a movie last year in Staten Island. So we are going to go shoot the movies where it makes sense for your project. And so you can set it on Mars, and then we'll figure out how to do that together, right? And so that's really important. And so this business model of books and film has never really been done. And so that's why I keep harping on the cinematic quality of writing and the idea of narrative hooks, because these are the things you absolutely have to make a movie work. We're not going to make dreamy lay on your back and look into the sky type of movies. We'll leave that to the Austin filmmakers who do that way better than anybody else. And we're going to make more Robert Rodriguez style movies, if that makes sense for all y'all Austinites. And the type of stuff Harry Knowles, another local Austinite whom I love dearly. We have a wonderful community of writers in the state, and so we want the next Hell or High Water. You know what I mean? That was a great movie from this past year. We want that. We want to come from a Texas writer. We want to come from one of y'all. Whether it's a script, we accept scripts as well. Or you can send us a book idea, or if you have a full manuscript, we love that. Just let us know. Again, the query letter, it doesn't have to be super long, but you just got to get us interested. So I know that's not very much instruction, but we can go into that later. Talk to me, just email me, and it's open submissions all the time.
What about for Texas Press, Colleen?
So UT Press does about 100 books a year, and about 30 of those are what we call trade book. The rest are academic books. So we have 6 people who do different levels of acquiring books. 2 of those specifically do trade, and one of those, in addition, is trade, but it's photography. So on our website, we have a very detailed, I actually checked it out today to make sure I knew what I was talking about. We have a very detailed listing of who the editors are, how to contact them, and what they publish. And so it's pretty easy to go in there and spend a few minutes and see if there is a match to your book. And again, it would be nonfiction because, unless you have a book that you've published in another language that you're ready to translate. It is interesting to see that, but they really, since I know them all pretty well, the acquiring editors, they do appreciate it if you say, I really like this book you published, or I read, I love the Jemima Code, and I have a book that is connected to that in some way. Because then they immediately know that they're the kind of thing they're looking for. It's not an ego thing. It's we're already starting off from common ground. So that's what I suggest. And every university press is different with the subject areas they acquire. And for us, for our trade books, we have Texana. But as I mentioned before, we're branching out into some architecture trade books. We do a lot of, or frequently, some Texas biographies, memoirs, but they're very specific what we're looking for with those memoirs. It's not just any Texan, it's, where does your story kind of fit into the wider story of Texas? And as I said, a lot of photography. For photographer, we have some good photography books.
So I'll ask one last question, and then we'll open it up to a couple of questions from the audience. Just what's something that we should look forward to from either you or from your organization that you have coming up soon? And we'll just start over here with you and go down the line.
Well, I mentioned in the this was a tough one because I feel bad saying one or two books and then the other books don't get included. But we have we're going to be at the San Antonio Book Festival. We have a booth there, and we have a bunch of authors who are also going to be present. And we have a beautiful. I'll talk about a little bit about photography. A beautiful photography book. There's two of them that are coming out in 2 weeks. One of them is called This Land, and it's by a guy named Jack Spencer who spent 13 years taking pictures across the country. And they're not just landscapes though. Like he really manipulated these photos with like the prints. Like if it's some place that made him feel sad, like the battle where the Battle of Wounded Knee took place, he used like acid to make it look darker and more ominous. And they're beautiful. And he, in this unusual thing for our press, he was just on the Charlie Rose show to talk about the book. And if you watch it, he's kind of dour and kind of intense, and he started doing this book because 9/11. After 9/11, he wanted to really find out what America meant to him, and that turned into a 13-year odyssey across 48 states. And it's just a gorgeous book. It's somebody said it makes them fall in love with America again, which I'm not into sort of patriotic statements like that, but it really is just beautiful. And then the other amazing photography book we have is a career retrospective on a photographer named Eddie Adams, who won the Pulitzer Prize in the early 70s for a photograph you've all probably seen called The Execution. And it took place in Vietnam. A general in Vietnam is shooting someone from a combatant. And Eddie Adams just happened to be there, and he took that picture. And but that's just one picture in a 50-year career. And there's a wonderful essay by Ann Wilkes Tucker, who was the curator of the Houston Museum of Fine Art. And it's just a mini biography of Eddie Adams, and it's just I really didn't know anything about him before I read that, and it's fantastic. So it's like this wonderful piece of American history through this one photographer, and I'm pretty excited about both of those.
At Cinestate, things are really ramping up for us. We just launched in the past year, and we shot our first movie, which is called Brawl in Cell Block 99, starring Vince Vaughn, Don Johnson, Jennifer Carpenter, and it's going to premiere this fall. And if you keep your fingers crossed, it might premiere at Fantastic Fest, y'all's amazing genre film festival here in Austin, put on by Tim League of the Alamo. And we love that festival and do a lot with them. We're shooting a low-budget horror movie called Puppet Master in Dallas this month, which is a blast. It's a reboot of a classic horror franchise, if anybody's seen those original movies. And that means a lot to us to shoot it in Dallas. It's really cool. We have a lot of local cast involved, a lot of local crew. The directors are from Sweden. We have some pretty amazing actors attached. Thomas Lennon is the lead. He's in like Reno 911, among a million other things. He's so cool. Guy's cool. And Udo Kier, who's one of the best villains in movie history. He's a German dude. He's going to be the villain in this. And so it's going to be a blast. And then we are shooting a really crazy movie with Mel Gibson in this summer. That's going to be a lot of fun. Then shooting another movie after that with Jeffrey Dean Morgan from The Walking Dead and Jack Houston from Ben-Hur up in upstate New York. And so, again, cinestate.com to check out all the movies. And then our first books start coming out this fall, which is really exciting. And so we got 3 books in our first season. One is the newest novel by the guy who wrote and directed Bone Tomahawk. We work a lot with him. It's a really amazing story. It's not quite what you expect from him, especially if you've seen Bone Tomahawk. This is more like David Lynch taking a look at a Tim Burton story from the 80s, back when he was super weird. And so you follow like an adorable miscreant type of kid, like a freak, through a coming-of-age story. It's really beautiful and well done. And then we are doing a really sexy thriller, like Dexter Meets Secretary novel called My Pet Serial Killer. And then this really cool, the debut author I mentioned to you guys, I just kind of discovered by blind submission. It's a wonderful sci-fi horror book that is really like nothing I've ever read before. And so it's like genre-based stuff is what we're all about. and just continuing to sign really exciting authors. And then the fun part is this spring, starting to send out the review copies to the bookstores and to anyone who has a blog covering horror stuff and all that fun stuff, because now we're going to start to connect the community that we've been talking about. And so that was really important at Deep Vellum. It's what gave us all of our success. And the fact that we are all about Texas is going to be important to us at Cinestate, the way it was at Deep Vellum. So Deep Vellum has had an author on the San Antonio Book Festival the last several years, including one this year named Eduardo Rabasa. You can get his book downstairs. It's in the literature and translation section. And then, yeah, so check out cinestate.com for all sorts of exciting stuff. Oh, and we have an audio project coming from audible.com. Sorry to talk about Audible, but they're like the only place that people listen to narrative audio that's not a podcast. And so we're working with them on some cool stuff. So we're working in the audio space as well, which is real exciting.
A few things, if I didn't say it loudly enough before, you should all buy Exit West. We are really, really excited about this book. There is obviously great national publicity happening for it as well. But when you buy it here at Book People, we're giving some of the proceeds to Caritas of Austin. So it's a really cool sort of joint promotion within the community. We have a brand new literature and translation section downstairs, which Will just mentioned. It literally went up yesterday. So finally, all of the literature that's in translation in the store is in one place rather than mixed in with the rest of our fiction, so that you would never stumble across it. And then lastly, we have a brand new book club that's launching in the store. We have about a dozen in-store book clubs, so if you don't know about those, you should definitely consider joining one. They are all bookseller-led, and they are totally not pretentious or anything like that. This new one that is launching is called Uncomfortable Reads. It's going to be a mix of new books and sort of backlist titles that are all meant to just sort of start a conversation about social issues. The first book that they are reading is called Why I Am Not a Feminist by Jessica Crispin. It just came out, and their first meeting is on March 28th. So it's coming up at 7 o'clock right here in this very room. So you still have time to get the book and buy it and read it before then.
Buy it downstairs.
Buy it downstairs.
Yes.
On March 31st, Fields Magazine is going to have their 7th issue release. So it'll be up for sale online, and you can read more at fieldsmagazine.com, which is where you can also submit.
Thank you all so much. Questions?
What do you think about self-publishing? Not necessarily through Amazon, but...
Yeah, I mean, I think self-publishing, when it's not through Amazon, can work. I think you have to understand that there are a lot of things a publisher can do for you in terms of using their network to get your book in the hands of the right people. So when your book is self-published, generally speaking, we carry it in the store on a consignment basis. And the way that sort of continues is by seeing actual sales from the book. So I think it's just it's a higher commitment from you to send your friends and family physically here to the store to buy it. And it can work. I think it's, generally speaking, I would encourage you to find a small independent press that's a good match for your work, because I think even having a very small press behind you can really, really help you out.
And can I ask you, Abby, because you gave everyone your email address earlier, is that also for folks who have self-published, or should they reach out to the consignment group directly for that?
Yeah, I mean, if your book is self-published and you know that we're going to have to take it on consignment, if you're trying to ask me about an event, I will send you to Michael McCarthy, who runs our consignment program first. You can still email me, and I'm happy to pass it on to him. But his email address, if you want to write it down, is businessaccounts@bookpeople.com. And so he will talk to you about the consignment process and how that works, and then sort of send you back to me to get an event on the calendar.
Self-publishing is a really tricky thing to answer when you're an independent publisher, because we want to publish as much as we can, but not every publisher can publish everything. And so there's a real value to self-publishing. Self-publishing we think of now exclusively as Amazon, but it has existed as long as the printed form has existed for thousands of years. In Russia, they called it samizdat during the Soviet Union. People were, typing out stuff on their own and distributing it among friends. There's a million ways to do this, right? But the things that are important that publishers do that if you self-publish it is important for you to take on is once you have had your submission accepted at a press, you generally go through an editing process with an editor who is professional and can help you as an outsider take an approach to your text that maybe can make it better. And then you have the book go through a production process that is very professional with a certain quality of art and production design that hopefully adds more value to the book. And then you go through the marketing process of getting that book out there and the distribution so that it reaches as many readers as possible everywhere in the world, so that it's not only available on one website, but it's available in bookstores, independent and otherwise, and it's available to international markets, and is available. Now the thing is, self-publishing, because of the digital revolution, is really amazing, right? It just is. But to get the book in front of readers without just selling it for free or 99 cents is a different ballgame, right? And I'm not in the business of selling things for 99 cents or giving it away. I am in a premium, entertainment market. I'm selling books, I'm selling movies, I'm selling audio stuff, and I'm not interested in free products. I think there's a different quality argument there. I want people to value the stuff that they are buying, acquiring, and developing a relationship with, and so that's something that publishers do. And so, but again, all things, all people, and so if you want to do the hustle and the marketing and to make it work, more power to you. But if you find a publisher who can help you with it too, I hope it works out.
I would say if you're considering self-publishing, go downstairs and look at the physical copies that we have in the store of self-published books, and
Is there a section?
they're mostly gathered toward the front of the store, so they're pretty easy to find, and sort of see what they look like in person. But you can sometimes tell the difference, just in like what the physical product looks like. And I would also, if you're looking into it, I would recommend you look into Ingram Spark.
Wonderful. Thank you all so much. Let's give a big round of applause to our panelists.
This has been the Writers League of Texas podcast. For more information about the Writers League of Texas and our many programs and services for writers, visit our website at writersleague.org. Email us at wlt@writersleague.org or give us a call at 512-499-8914. Thank you for listening.